was in the church, and it was also running by itself in a secular society. And from 1517 to 1648, we had something called the Reformation. I'm sure all of you have heard of that. The church splits, and you get a bunch of denominations going off. They became Protestant. It was all over church authority. Okay, what was the authority in the church? The Bible, or was it the church? What was the final authority? The Reformer said it's the Bible. The other group said it's the church. Final authority, all right, so it's split. I'm only using this as a historic basis. I'm getting to now what's the important thing. And from 1730 to 1770, something happened in the American colonies, predating the Revolution. It was called the Great Awakening. Has anybody heard of that?
Yep.
Okay, the Great Awakening. It was a revival. And this revival, you had itinerant, this wasn't led like necessarily by pastors, there were itinerant, like Wesley and these preachers would go out and they would go to a town and they would attract huge crowds of people. Benjamin Franklin and all the founding fathers heard these guys speak. And they would have, I mean, this is colonial days, we didn't have that much population, but they would pull these huge crowds. And what happened was something began to change. This, what we would call a revival, this is what the Great Awakening was, a Christian revival, spread like wildfire, and it brought us to a point where we could have the American Revolution. It preceded it, but what it did was, remember, all the colonies weren't all the same, run the same way. Some had religions or a church in that colony where you would pay taxes to that church whether you belonged to it or not. Other colonies didn't have that. But a lot of the colonies all had a different denomination or type of religion, Christian obviously, but there were walls up because of that. The Great Awakening tore those walls down between all these denominations, and that's what opened up the way for the American Revolution. At the same time, something else was happening in Europe called the Enlightenment. So see, we've got the Great Awakening here. Look at this as like a timeline, and paralleling it is the Enlightenment, right? The Enlightenment is taking place mostly in France, and it was probably the center of it, and through a lot of the rest of Europe. And the Enlightenment was, when we went back to the Renaissance, we had humanism that came in through the secular, non-church population, and we had some humanism that came into the church, which caused this eventual split. But this humanism that was the secular humanism, okay, that led to the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment was going on at the same time that closely to the American Revolution and to the Great Awakening. So what happened was the American Revolution came out of this Great Awakening, and what we got out of that. We actually got our freedoms. We got our Constitution. I want to read you a quote here that really sums it up. Let me see if I can find it. It's by John Quincy Adams, and this explains what was happening. This is John Quincy Adams. Two quotes. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to govern any other. So there's one insight. Our Constitution was made for a religious, now he's tying it in with religion, and he's talking about Christianity. The second quote, what do we mean by the revolution? The war? That was no part of the revolution. So now he's saying, John Quincy Adams saying the war wasn't part of the revolution. It was only an effect and consequence of the revolution. The revolution was in the minds of the people, and this was effected from 1760 to 1775 in the course of 15 years before a drop of blood was shed at Lexington. What you have to realize is the American Revolution took place during the religious revival of the Enlightenment. That was a revolution that turned people's minds from being under a king to being under a government that was going to be run by the people without a monarch. And the revolution was just the act that threw off the monarchy to allow this government to come into being and exist. Okay? So we have a Christian foundation in this country, and here's what happens. We follow American history. We had a second Great Awakening in the early 1700s, and as you go through American history, we've had a number of revivals that have kept this country from falling into despotism or other things that aren't good, right? We had the Azusa Street Revival in the early 1900s, out of which a bunch of denominations were formed. Probably the most recent, closest thing we had was the Jesus movement following the whole hippie and drug thing in the 60s. The Jesus movement came in. That's where the Christian right and the moral majority rose up and put Reagan in. And we saved ourselves a generation with that minor revival, okay? At the same time, the Enlightenment led to Karl Marx, communism, socialism, the hundreds of millions of people that were killed by Mao Zedong, by Lenin, by Stalin, by Castro, by all these Marxists. All that came out of humanistic thought. When you have humanistic thought or secular humanism, this is what you get. It will always lead to that. The utopia is always dependent on how many people we can kill. Agenda 21 wants to take the world population down to 500 million. We're looking at 7 billion to 500 million. They want, and you can read this, there's something called the Georgia Guidestones. They were put up, it's the 10 Commandments of humanism, basically, and that's one of the tenets of it. We got to reduce this population, get rid of people. When you look at the crime rates in America and all this other stuff that's been on the rise, what has happened, and this is the conclusion I came to after this 6-month study. The root cause of our problem, we have had the Christian consensus that this country was built on. Only the Constitution cannot stand without the Christian consensus, just as Adams has told us. Without a Christian consensus, we cannot hold on to the Constitution. It's getting away from us. As that goes out and the Christian consensus moves out of this country, something is moving in, a tide to replace it. And this is the humanism. This is a religion called secular humanism. And this is the tide that's bringing with it every bad thing you see that you don't like, that you see as immoral, that you see as anti-Constitution and anti-Christianity, is coming in on this tide as Christianity ebbs out. Now, the problem is we've got two pillars that hold up our freedoms in our country. One is Christianity and the other is the Constitution. Neither one's going to do it without the other. The attack today is the attack, you look at the attack on Christianity. We want every vestige of it out of the country. We want crosses gone, symbolism gone, holidays gone. They want all of that gone, even though we've had it for 200 plus years. And it was all perfectly legal, now it's illegal. The other thing is what's becoming legal is everything from the other side. All the immorality and all the stuff that comes with that is now legal. So as this Christian tide is flowing out, the humanist tide is flowing in. That is the basis of where the problem comes from. Now, I'm going to get down to the root of the problem. And maybe somebody's going to be shocked by what I'm going to say. The root of the problem lies in the churches in America. The churches are not doing their job to get out and get people converted to Christianity. They're not getting out and they're not getting the morality of the gospel, the word of God out there. The churches have compromised. And this is why this other tide is coming in. My belief firmly is the only hope we have as a country. We have got to have another revival, another awakening. If we do not have that, I don't care how hard we fight, we're going to lose it. Now, the caveat I want to put on that is we've got to keep fighting until that happens. You can't let this whole other thing overwhelm you. You've got to stand and fight. And if you read your Bible, what does God admonish you to do after you've done everything you can? Just keep standing on your faith. And I'm telling you, I studied this for 6 months. The only conclusion I could come to looking at history and the facts is you've got to have another Christian revival. And I can tell the Tea Parties now, if you're a Christian, you better start praying. And you'll know the revival is coming in when you see the walls between the denominations going down. You want to get people together, like you're talking, We want to bring libertarians because they believe a lot of what we believe with the Tea Party, etc. together. We need to get the churches together. And the churches need to start standing on the Word of God and on that Bible. And they need to start pushing their beliefs and saying we're not giving in another inch. And we're going to pray till we get a revival. And I'm telling you, this I believe firmly is the only hope we've got. So what I'm going to do now, you've got my opinion, you've got my take on this, and you know a little bit about what's happening with Agenda 21. We're at 8:30. If anybody wants to leave, please feel free. My time is up. I will be glad to take questions, as many as I can, if anybody has them, and answer them. You know, now, obviously, I guess, if anybody wants to go ahead, but does anybody have any questions?
One thing I do want to mention to you is I just bought a camera. So we're going to have this on video, and we will be uploading it as soon as I learn how, hopefully tonight. Okay, but I'm hoping that you will hang around a little bit if you possibly can and get some questions, because there's a lot more he's got to share with us.
All right, we'll start here.
Two related questions with the rank tax.
Yeah.
Would it have been easier for the state legislature just to pass a law for all the counties? And the second question is, explain why Kirk Dillard from DuPage County would vote for president.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's answer Kirk Dillard first. He's a politician. He wants no controversy while he's in a race. He doesn't understand it, so obviously he doesn't want to take a side. Why get involved in controversy when you're wrong?
Absolutely.
And the other question was, what was it?
Why not just allow all counties to do the rank tax and just speed everything up?
They love to do it, but I'm going to tell you something about DuPage County. Years ago, when my church was involved with their wetlands thing, and I started catching on to the corruption, I went into the office of the engineering firm that we were using. And I walked in, I had to put some paperwork in, and I said to the guy that was handling our account, I said, what's going on with all this corruption in DuPage County? He looked around, right away a girl got up, went to make a phone call back to the county. He got me out of there because that engineering company had people working for it that used to be working for the stormwater division. He hauls me out in the parking lot, says, I gotta go to lunch, let's go out to the parking lot. Well, he wasn't going to lunch. He took me out there to tell me, away from everybody, says DuPage County's is putting out the most draconian controls over your property and the stormwater and all this in the country because they want to spread this to every other county in the country. DuPage County, the radicals running these offices, are totally sold out to this stuff, and they want DuPage County to be the centerpiece, and they figure being a Republican county, nobody's ever going to catch on before they get this thing set up and instituted. That's why DuPage County is on the forefront of pushing this range tax. We're not the only county that has it, but that's why it's not going through all Illinois. DuPage County specifically wants it because the staff in the county is the one that are pushing this, and they are radical.
I have 3 questions, sorry. Okay, first of all, Downers Grove is already paying a DuPage County stormwater utility fee, correct?
You are paying a Downers Grove utility.
Or Downers Grove
That's the
utility
city, yes.
fee. If DuPage County passes this, will Downers Grove residents have to pay double?
Yes, you'll pay 2
stormwater
of them, absolutely.
Okay, that's unbelievable. Dan Cronin used to be a senator. Now he's our chairman. What was is any of this, the reason he's chairman now, was any of this part of it? Why would he go from senator to county board chairman?
It's a lot easier work. He's just a few blocks from his house. He doesn't have to drive to Springfield all the time, and he gets a lot bigger paycheck. He gets 130-some thousand as opposed to 70-something as a senator. So it was a nice move up for him.
I didn't know if this had anything to do with.
Well, he's big on the
being a
green.
leader.
He's one of these tree huggers, and he set up a green council last summer in DuPage County, in which he brought in the Sierra Club members basically to set the agenda. And that green council was to be regulatory, to set regulations, one, to reduce our footprint for global warming, and secondly, to push the rent tax through.
And last question, the real estate crisis. People are losing their homes, they're sitting vacant, the banks own them, now the governments. Does this have anything to do with that?
The real estate deal is, and let me read you something I'll read you a quote This really doesn't, but we have, I'm going to give you a quote by Thomas Jefferson that'll tell you something. Everybody knows what the Federal Reserve is. Anybody read The Creature from Jekyll Island?
Yes.
Okay. Here's a quote from Thomas Jefferson in 1802. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberty than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. That's Thomas Jefferson in 1802. Your crisis, the real estate crisis, was created by the Fed. They've done this over and over again. And yes, they are tied in. I can give you Fed ties to Agenda 21 and One World Government. They are absolutely for it. They don't care if people lose their property. They would rather not have you in a single family home. Okay, any other questions? Wow, this is it. I normally get about 45 minutes, so okay.
You mentioned about churches, that they should try to explain to the people when they go to Mass or go to any other, what they're against. And I feel, as a Christian, and I do go to church, that I think our pastors should tell the congregation what we are against, but they don't. They don't. And I know the women of the United States, that they are for abortion, for this, for that, for that, for that, you name it, right down the line. And our church, I'm Catholic, and we are against those things. But the priests are against it. But they never say it in their congregation. They never get up and say that they should not vote because you understand what I'm trying to say?
Here's a problem that scares a lot of churches and church leadership from speaking from the pulpit. 1954. Lyndon B. Johnson puts forth a bill in the Senate. He was a senator. That bill changed the IRS code for not-for-profits, 501c3s, and what it did was it said any 501c3, if your preacher gets up and speaks out supporting a candidate or whatever, you lose your tax-exempt status.
But sir, but I'm not saying they have to get out and support one candidate for another. Forget about.
But it scares them out of the other issues. They don't want to touch politics. It flows way beyond what the initial design of this thing was, because they don't want to take a chance. They don't want to get involved in politics.
Now, I'm trying to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but you're trying to tell me because they might come out and tell the women or anybody, and they can do it in a board, they don't have to just come out and say it. But I go to church every Sunday, and I know that all this is going on last few years because of the elections and what we believe. And they never mention anything about, and they don't have to go for, if you're a Republican or conservative.
Well, go to your neighbors and ask them how much they know about this stuff. They don't. The pastors and preachers and priests don't know about this. I wrote a letter to every church I could, Catholic, Protestant, in DuPage County about the rain tax. I only had 2 get back to me, even though their property was going to be taxed. I only had 2 that directly got back to me out of all the hundreds of letters I sent out. The problem is they don't understand it. We've got to be able to get into some of the different conferences. I spoke with the Joliet Archdiocese, which controls DuPage County, for the Catholics about this. They had their representative in Springfield, who was their lobbyist, and they're probably the biggest property holder in DuPage County, and I just couldn't get them up and running with it. Now, we did get it with the tea parties. We put the pressure and got this thing stalled out at the county level. But the churches are hard to work with. And I dealt with one of the churches that the county went after, and you could just tell they were afraid. They were going to put a target on our back if we deal with some of this.
The only thing is, a year or so ago, when they were trying to get the pill into these institutions, the bishop wrote some beautiful letters, and they presented those letters at our churches, at our masses. And that's the first time that the church, and I'm not saying the church is good to politics, I don't believe in that. But I meant to say they didn't feel that institutions should be forced to have these, the abortion and all that, you know, the pills, whatever it might be.
Right,
And
well-
remember that letter? It was very,
Yeah.
very outstanding. I'm not saying anything, but I just feel that you mentioned that back 200 years ago, or 100 years ago, when the churches all got together, and because of that, we had a wonderful overhaul of the United States, and I think the churches, whether, I don't care what you believe in, but we need the churches, whether you're Protestant, Catholic, whatever,
Absolutely. Without the churches getting active,
and that's what you were trying to do.
right, without a revival, and I'm not saying picking out any denomination, I'm saying it's a wide, when God moves, you need a wide revival over all the churches. I saw it happen. A revival started in Springfield 20 years ago. I went down there. It was Catholic, it was Lutheran, it was Episcopal, they were all there.
Right.
Now, the thing went, but it just
Got
didn't
it.
explode out of Springfield, it went back
Okay.
down. But we've had these things start, they just haven't gone nationwide. I think we're gonna get one, but you gotta have to pray the thing in. If you're a Christian, you better be praying for revival. And that's what I'm saying, that's the solution to this,
That's what you were trying to
underlying
go.
solution to the whole problem.
I think you mentioned 6 counties. What are they?
7, you can go to CMAP and it shows them, Google up CMAP, and it'll show you, and you can get to it through the DuPage County Economic Development site. When you go onto the county website, they'll put you into CMAP too, because they connect right into it. But there's 7 counties, it's Cook County, DuPage, Kane, Lake, I don't know what the other ones are, but that's basically it, yeah.
I don't know if that's the question, but with, you're talking about like the water, one district where you had the problem?
Oh, the stormwater division with the
So
wetlands.
those organizations, those people, are they elected in or how are they?
The stormwater staff is not. There is a board, it's called the Stormwater Management Committee, that's made up of half municipal members, like mayors or the representatives, and half county board members. I've gone in there, I spoke at public comment for years. These people told me, why aren't you listening to what I'm saying? They said, well, we pay staff good money to tell us what to do, so we listen to them. It shows you how detached your government is from you. They don't want to hear from the people, they want to hear
Staff
from
are the ones that are more,
those are the unelected, radical, green people that are putting all this stuff out, and they just rubber stamp it as board members.
it's just more than maybe that, we need to, people of our conservative mindset need to get into those positions and.
Oh, if you can run, we need county board members. We got to get conservative county board members and get these liberals out of there and all these deadbeats. I'm for replacing the entire county board. Let's get Tea Party people and conservatives and libertarians in there. Let's get rid of these other people. We can do it, but we got to run. We got to say, hey, I gotta step out and run. I ran, my wife ran. We didn't win, but we got a fairly conservative candidate that ran against myself and my wife. He lost in the general in the first one. He might win this one. It's a step in the right direction, but we got to get more of those in there. We have to go. We just have to run and take these offices back.
I'd like to get your thoughts on something I've been thinking about. When Barack Obama first got elected, the first thing he did was he got rid of our space program. So the other day I heard that we were up in space, fixing a space station. And I asked my husband, well, how did we get there? I thought we got rid of the space program. And he said, we hitched a ride with the Russians. And I remember when he was visiting with Putin, he said, I'll have more flexibility after the election. I'd like to know what your thoughts are about that. And 2, how do we get more young people involved with the Tea Party?
Okay, let me hit the 2. The first one's a little off subject, but
Yeah,
I agree with you. I don't know why we're messing with the Russians. We're the greatest country in the world. We ought to have our own space program.
$71 million each way that we pay the Russians to send our astronauts up there.
The second one is how do you get young people in? I look at the 60s. I had to study that to come up with my conclusion here. You know what happened in the 60s? These radicals went out to the college campuses and recruited. And that's what turned, you can go in the early 60s and you can look, these folk singers started going in and you could see the nice kids sitting there with their suits on and all nicely dressed. And you could tell these came from good homes and these kids were a different morality, a different thought than they were 3-4 years later by the late 60s. They went in, they brought in singers, they brought in people that came out and pushed this political stuff. They had radical professors. They went after the students. And what we need to do is we need to get back to having, the Tea Party ought to be out putting together campus outreaches for colleges and get out on those campuses and find out where we can reach and touch the students, where they need help, and get out there and draw them in. And at the same time, the churches ought to be doing that too. But there is not anywhere near the campus outreach that there was 30, 40 years ago. And we need to get that because the next step from the campus is they're in the business, they're in the government, and they're making decisions based on what they learn in college. So yeah, I think the answer is the Tea Party needs to, and I've thought about this long and hard, I think the Tea Party needs to put together a plan to get to every campus in this country, get some kind of a supported campus outreach going, and get in there and reach these students one-on-one. Sometimes it's hard if you speak to a group because they don't want to be different than a group, but when you get them away one-on-one, when I was running for county board, right across the street from the county complex, there just down the street, I ran into two young college guys standing in a garage drinking beer, and I said, "Hi, I'm a candidate for county board." The first guy was telling me, "Oh yeah, the no good, the Constitution's outdated, it's written by these old guys, we don't need it anymore." Well, where'd you learn that? I learned that at my college I'm going to. The second guy was learning the same thing. The one guy I couldn't reach, his parents were basically Marxists. They came out and said, "Good boy, you're telling them good." The other kid was from down the street visiting in the garage, and he started saying, "Well, is this really the way it is, what you're telling me, as opposed to what the professors are telling me?" He was open to it. So I know there's kids that are open to it, but we got to reach them. And we got to get, they can't just have one input in their mind. These colleges are all out there on the left, every one of them. And they're just loading their mind up with this left-wing progressive garbage. Anti-constitutional, anti-Christian, pro-Marxist, this development thing, this sustainability. Our county's reaching out to all the high schools. They had a sustainability challenge the last 2 years. I go into a county board meeting once a year when they bring in the high school students, and they have hallways loaded with these tables, and the high school students have their projects on there. Windmills and all this sustainable stuff. They're all learning how you're going to live in a sustainable world, which is totally different from your parents' world, and the constitutional world, and the Christian world. But this is what they're teaching them. Your own county leftists in those offices are reaching out into the high school, right here in our county. Where are we reaching out? We got to get in there. We got to figure a way of doing that. And we got to get to these young people because we got something to tell them, and what we're telling them is the truth, not the lies they're getting. Okay.
How do you think that we're, all the municipalities running out of money? How do you think that's going to affect these grant schemes?
Well, this is your president's order from '09, or when he came in and said, we want to push through HUD and the Department of Transportation, and we want to push this Agenda 21 in. And this is how they're doing it. You're running out of money, we got a bag of money. How do you think they
They don't have a bag of money.
Well, the federal government just prints it. They're printing $85 billion a month. Hey, here's a bag of money. Put a
We
program.
all know that's fine.
But they're doing it. That's how they're doing it now. That's how they're pushing it in. They're coming with a bag of money, and they're using public-private partnerships like St. Charles is doing. Hey, we want this type of building in here. We'll give you some government funding and a break on the zoning, et cetera, if you build to what we want on your property. And that's what they're doing. It's going on right now. Oh, yeah, okay.
You mentioned Bush. What about past presidents? How far does it go back? Reagan, Nixon,
Well,
Eisenhower?
Reagan was the big break. Eisenhower, the big boo-boo he made was signing. He was a president when Johnson put through the changed the IRS codes that knocked preachers out of the making any political comment. But when you go up beyond that, really Agenda 21 really came in '92. So it really, Bush was the one who signed, Bush 41 signed us on to it. So he was a one world guy. Then Clinton picked it up and it went from there. So that's about how far back it goes. I had a quote, I don't know, did I read you the Bush quote? Let me see if I got it here. Yeah, President Bush 41, here it is. Here's his quote from the Rio Conference. "It is the sacred principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter to which American people will henceforth pledge their allegiance." There's your Bush 41. That's about where it started.
You can catch him on YouTube and save it. You can catch Eisenhower talking about the military-industrial complex. That goes all the way back. And then Bush talks about Agenda 21 and the one world government. And then the sun follows through. And all the presidents follow through. Kissinger, Rockefeller, they're all in on that.
Oh, absolutely, you're right. All these top-level elitists in government or in business, the big moneymakers are on Wall Street, the bankers, they're all for a one world government because it's going to make them a lot more money. And they don't care about the little guy in the bottom. It's all an elitist deal. And I mean, I can go back. You want to go into the Bible? What does it say at the end times? The Antichrist. What's it going to do? One world government. I mean, Napoleon tried it. Hitler tried it. Alexander the Great tried it. Nimrod, tried it. They want to put together. There's always been a desire through the elite in the world over centuries to try to put in a one world government. We're probably much closer to having that today because they didn't have the communications or the ability to do it. We have the technology to do it today, and that's why it's being pushed so heavily and why we're so close to it. And this Agenda 21 in your county is part of it.
I just wanted to quickly say you're absolutely right when it comes to the youth. The youth, we kind of have to go out to them. We can't wait for them to come, unfortunately, because that's what I'm doing. I just graduated a year ago, and I'm leading youth outreach. But just from my experience and myself as a college student, they're out there, it's palatable. Students are listening, they want an alternative, and it's, the Tea Party get out on college campuses here in DuPage County, whether it's Benedictine, Aurora, Wheaton, because they're questioning a lot of what they're being told. But they just don't know where to go or who to talk to. And so just, I don't know, word of encouragement, we're listening. Just, don't be afraid to.
Well, here's something. This would be a good area for you to take some leadership in.
Don't let her out of the room, don't let her out of the room.
Yes, maybe you could help the Tea Party get into the college campuses. There you go.
Actually, there are two youth groups in the area. One is Turning Point America, and they're really great. This guy Charlie Kirk is a leader, and he's just a high school graduate, and he's been on Fox News quite a few times. He's really sharp.
Well, see, these are the people you need to reach out to and say, look, how can we help you as a Tea Party? What can we give you? Can we supply you with literature? Can we come out and speak? Can we do something? Because listen, the youth, Tea Party tends to be a little more age-wise than the average college student. So you've got a lot you could, my attorney used to tell me, man doesn't get a hint of brains till he's 39. So if you're over 39, you're probably in pretty good shape to be able to impart something to the youth that's going to help. I say I had one. Was he okay?
I was just thinking that if this economy continues to fail the way it is, a lot of these young people are really frustrated that they've gone to school, they think they've done everything right, and they cannot find work. I think we have a great opportunity to reach them, by virtue of the fact that they're working part-time jobs and they're not able to pay their bills or move out of their mom and dad's home.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. We got to get out of our comfort zone. You want to reach them? You got to get up and reach them. We can't reach them sitting in a chair at our house watching a baseball game. We got to get out and be proactive and do it. And one of the greatest things about the Tea Party is, and I've been a member for almost 5 years, is one thing is you get information, great information. We've had great speakers with the Tea Parties that I belong to, great input, but then you got to pick it up and take it and go out and do something with it. And that's where you're going to make the difference. You got to go and do it. So yeah, I agree with you. Anybody else? Any other questions? One more?
I would like to recommend the YouTube again and go to ROSA, R-O-S-A,
Yeah.
And all of her videos.
Behind the green man.
Yes, what she's talking about is if you want to get more information on Agenda 21, Rosa Corey runs the organization called Democrats Against Agenda 21. She was a victim on some of her own property of this as a Democrat, and she turned around and decided to fight it. She's got a very comprehensive website with videos, with information and links. And if you go to Rosa Corey, you go to Democrats Against Agenda 21, Google it, get on the website, you can pick up a lot more information. And I strongly suggest, I say, for the amount of time I had here, I could only give you the briefest of introductions into it and kind of where it is affecting us locally. But I'm encouraging you, just get on your computer, take this outline I've given you, start Googling some of this up, and you're going to find out a lot more about this. And I'm hoping, you want to get more active. I'm hoping you're going to join me at a protest against the corruption in the county sometime this summer. Because this is the best area I've determined we can hit this thing as citizens. Is the corruption is always with it, and you can do some real damage to it through that.
Thanks for coming.